Welcome into the latest edition of the Unpaid Interns. It is Monday, July 27th. Austin Render and Connor Hines joining you live here on the latest podcast episode here on IU Sports Media's YouTube page. You might be catching us on your podcast as well. Connor, how are you? Happy to have you again.
Austin, it's good to see you. We certainly do not have a shortage of things to talk about today. Let's get right into it, though. It's been a pretty wild last 72 hours in baseball.
Yeah, so baseball started Thursday with the Nationals Yankees fittingly going into a weather delay that ended up ending the game after 6 innings. The Dodgers and Giants also kicked things off as well. And we've had a full weekend of baseball, and there seemed to be, there was some sad Twitter like, oh man, my team's struggling. But for the most part, it felt like an upbeat Twitter like weekend because everyone was getting to watch their teams, and everybody seemed to be happy because their teams were playing. You and your Padres were out there playing, and now all of a sudden I wake up to a text from you, and it's a screenshot of just a bombshell from the MLB. The Marlins have at least 14 confirmed positive cases in the last 2 or 3 days. Their game. So let me just read you through what has happened in the last 90 minutes. Marlins-Orioles game is canceled because of the discovery of 8 new positive tests for the Miami Marlins. Phillies-Yankees has been canceled because that's who the Marlins just finished playing, was the Phillies. MLB to hold an emergency meeting today to discuss what needs to be done. And Jeff Passan on the Pat McAfee show just dropped a quote that said, quote, going out and playing games tonight anywhere would look just completely tone deaf. So that's a bit of a bombshell there from Jeff Passan saying, look, not only should the Phillies and Marlins not play, this could spread like wildfire and we might need to just kind of shut it down.
Yeah. I mean, look, the doomsday scenario in baseball that we've been waiting for has finally arrived. I mean, we've talked since day one on this show, Austin. It's not going to be a matter of if, it is a matter of when. It's the reality of the situation. It's the reality of playing anything, sports related in the middle of a global pandemic. 12 out of the 30 active players test positive. That's 40% of the team. And you have to think that if you see this now, as you just sort of alluded to, you would assume it's going to spread, which is why the reasonable thing to do at the very least is to cancel those 2 games. The Marlins home opener tonight in Miami, and then Yankees-Phillies, which would be played in that same stadium. I wouldn't want to be Rob Manfred right now. Clearly at the end of the day, that 113-page protocol that Major League Baseball initially issued, there's nothing specific about how to handle a situation like this, and that was certainly intentional. Just because it's such a case-by-case scenario, as we've talked about time and time again, we're in such uncharted waters here. But the one thing that I do know that the protocol sort of reserved the rights to was that it outlines very clearly that a situation like this is in Rob Manfred's hands. It's in the commissioner's hands. So we'll have to wait and see. I mean, it's just a matter of what he decides to do with it from here. I mean, what is a solution? Are there double headers later in the season?
Sorry,
we're just trying to get to that magical number of 60. But if anything, the last 48, 72 hours have told us just got a lot more difficult.
Sorry, I had to put my dog on the camera. If you've been listening to our podcast for the past week or so, she's really struggling when I record because she sits outside my door and whines. So I had to bring her in, but that's good stuff. I mean, here's my thought. We knew this was going to be hard because the NBA is doing a bubble. The WNBA is doing a bubble. The TBT did a bubble. The MLS is doing a bubble. The MLB is not doing a bubble. And we kind of knew this was an issue. And the issues that will stem from this go further than the MLB. They go to the NFL. How does the NFL look at what the MLB is doing and say, well, shoot, this clearly is not working? how does college football look at this and say, the MLB is not making it work. How are we going to make it work? I think there's a lot of interesting things about it. And I saw Mike Golick Jr. tweeted something this morning. The Premier League, the English Premier League soccer, they tested over 2,000 people throughout their revamped season. 0 positive cases amongst the Premier League once play had resumed. I know there were some before they resumed play, but that's pretty telling on how they're handling it overseas. Really, that's more of a virus thing in general, but this certainly raises red flags, not
Mhm.
only for the MLB, but I think for other sports leagues as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And with baseball specifically, as you sort of alluded to there, with all the cross travel, yes, they realigned the schedule to be more regional, but at the same time, with baseball more than anything else, as we've talked about on this show before, it comes down to yes, the coronavirus isn't going to go away. Yes, it's fairly inevitable that players are going to test positive. At the end of the day, it's just going to be the most disciplined teams in terms of, taking the necessary precautions and doing everything that you need to do. Those teams are going to be the ones that are most successful this season because they're going to have their full extent of players available. And is the Marlins, is this happening to the Marlins? Is that not just the most on brand Florida thing that we could think up here?
I mean, is there not to joke about it, but is there an MLB team that has been more of a mess? I mean, maybe the Orioles in the past like 5 or 6
It was
years.
it was gonna be Florida. You knew it was gonna be Florida.
Yeah, Florida's been a mess, and that's not surprising. But unfortunately, the MLB is spiraling in a really bad direction. The other sports leagues are doing much better, though. I will say, as a golf fan, I got concerned about week 2 or 3 when there started to be 4 or 5 positive cases, but those have kind of died down. They only had one this week, and he withdrew back on Monday. The PGA Tour seems to be moving really well, and as long as they don't try and like get ahead of themselves and try and bring fans in or something like that, if they stay to what is working, I think the PGA Tour can make this work, and it starts to make me a little bit hopeful about some major events coming up soon. The NBA is working. At least we have not heard of a single positive test within the bubble. And one big news for Indiana is that in the state of Indiana, Oladipo looks to be getting healthier and healthier, looks to be playing very well with the Pacers. But they do lose Sabonis. Very fun team, though, the Indiana Pacers, Connor. I know I've been trying to get you on the Indianapolis sports bandwagon a little bit, but the Pacers are a fun team right now, and they may not win an NBA title or even get to the Eastern Conference Finals, but they're a team that has some talent that can really mess with some people in the East.
It's fun to watch. I've been doing a little bit of coverage of the Pacers through my internship, and just to see, even in that first little exhibition scrimmage, just to see Oladipo and Malcolm Brogdon sort of trading blows and putting up shots, it just felt normal, regardless of the circumstances. They're so fun to watch, and with the Oladipo situation, it seems to change by the hour. But hopefully he sticks it out, and hopefully he realizes that you know regardless of what the future holds in terms of a contract situation, he's an Indiana Pacer for the time being. And if he could, stick out the remainder of this, shortened regular season, and then as the NBA jumps into the postseason here in the NBA bubble, that would be very, very huge for Indiana to have Vic there along for the ride.
The last thing I wanted to touch on, I didn't get to watch any of it live. This is a buddy of mine's 21st weekend, so we were out playing some golf. But the WNBA returned, I believe, Saturday, and Sabrina Ionescu looks exactly what you would expect her to look like. Like, she is going to be the Michael Jordan of WNBA. Like, I'm making that stance. She's played one game, or maybe two. But I'm making that stance right now. She's the Michael Jordan of the WNBA. That woman is incredibly talented, and I am really excited to watch her and her development in the WNBA. Just wanted to put that out there because if you haven't watched her yet, go catch some highlights and catch her next game because she is extremely talented. You know who else is talented, Connor? Our first guest that we're going to bring in here. He is Jeremy Gray, the Senior Associate Athletic Director for Strategic Communications and the Director of the Cuban Center. Jeremy, we are happy to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here. Good to see you guys.
Oh, we're just happy to be doing something here with our extra time that we have on our hands, and happy to have Jeremy Gray with us. I guess my first question to you is, without sports, what's been keeping you busy? Maybe prior to the past couple of weeks where we've started to get some sports, but what was keeping you busy before that?
You know, it's interesting. In a weird way, this has been the busiest summer I've ever had working for the athletic department. Our calendar usually works where, starting after the first week of June, we're basically at the end of college baseball season through the end of July. That's when everybody takes their vacations. They, maybe get good at golf or tennis. They try to do different things. But a lot of Zoom calls trying to, make plans for the fall, with different contingencies. Talking to Connor before I hopped on here, probably similar to one of his parents who's a elementary school principal. Like, all right, this is what we're going to do if it's online only. This is what we're going to do if it's a hybrid. This is what we're going to do if the students are allowed to come back. Coming up with different plans for sports when and if they return has been quite the undertaking.
What does that look like? I mean, I know you can't spill everything by any means, but what have those conversations kind of looked like, especially over the past few weeks, as we start to get closer and closer to a potential school year and a potential college football season?
Yeah, so it's just been a lot of planning. So, we had a plan for a regular football season, and then it went to Big Ten conference games only. And so that changed things. Obviously, there were some budget implications from this last year that you probably read about. So, certain things, had to be cut or contoured to be able to work it within those budget parameters. And for a while, it was really, really stressful, really, really frustrating, unable to make plans. But then you kind of get into a mode of acceptance, like, hey, this is what we're doing today. Thursday, it could be a totally different thing. So we just got to be ready to roll with the punches when they come. But coming up with a plan A, plan B, C, D, and E, so that if we move from plan B to plan C, we're prepared for it. So a lot of planning meetings, and a lot of talking things through, and things that you wouldn't normally, even think of. Like, all right, if we have football, but no one other than essential personnel can be on the field, where's a corner of the football stadium we can put a camera position, getting them off the field? What do we do about sideline reporting, in a situation like that? So thinking through those types of contingencies, every time you come up with an answer, it poses two more questions for you. So working through it, it has been what we're doing.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I think the last time you and I were able to chat in person was, I don't know, the first or second week of March. Take us back to March 11th. I know Austin and I know where we were. I was on the call at Bankers Life Fieldhouse in Indy. Austin was on the boards in the studio for us the night the sports world just sort of came crashing down. What was that night like for you in particular? What were conversations like in the athletic department in the coming days? Because I remember at that point, that night after IU beat Nebraska in their first Big Ten tournament game, it was the conversation was at that very moment, okay, no more fans for the rest of the tournament. And then less than 24 hours later, the Big Ten tournament gets canceled. I have to imagine that was probably one of the most hectic times that you've ever seen, during your time at IU.
It's interesting. IU basketball is kind of a part of the national story of the cancellation of sports, because if you recall, the NBA, Adam Silver made the decision. And then in a weird sidebar to all of this, Tom Hanks tested positive for coronavirus and was quarantining, I think, like in New Zealand or something. And those two things happened just as the tip-off of the IU-Nebraska basketball game in the Big Ten tournament. So the updates kept coming in during our game. And then the Nebraska coach, for something totally unrelated, was sick during the game itself, and people started asking the questions in the game, kind of on Twitter, social media, of like, are they going to be able to do this with fans anymore? And it was a crazy time. The next day was wild because the Big Ten was, making their decision on their conference tournament. But then we had teams getting ready for spring break. And for those not aware, we have a lot of spring sports, and almost all of them go somewhere really far away for spring break, either training or competition. So we were on the phone with sport administrators from institutions all across the country, canceling or changing events, and then telling other schools, maybe they shouldn't be coming here. So, I was talking to the me of Iowa, and the women's tennis team was coming to Bloomington for a match, and they came here, got all the way to Bloomington, got to the Walmart parking lot, turned around and went back to Iowa. So they had like a 16-hour round trip on a bus. It got canceled just as they were arriving in town. We had water polo set to go to play USC and UCLA in Los Angeles. So canceling those flights on a moment's notice, canceling those games, and working with our colleagues at those schools. Tennis was getting ready to play at Arizona State, flying out there for a spring break trip. The earliest call was actually golf, and I wasn't, I don't oversee golf, but they were getting ready to play in Seattle when Seattle was the hotspot along with New York City in the United States for COVID at that time. So they were the first and easiest cancellation. And then you had cancellations with the inability to get a flight to come back. So then you're renting buses to get teams back from spring break trips to Florida for softball and things like that. So it was really, really chaotic. But those decisions came quickly, pretty promptly after canceling those events. Then whole seasons got canceled. And then there was the question about what do you do with the spring sport athletes whose seasons were truncated? Do you give them an extra year of eligibility, especially the senior class? So those decisions came rolling in, and then everything was shut down until mid-June, when then we started having kind of return to participate protocols in place to have students come back to work out. So it was a wild time, and I'll never forget it.
I want to ask one more question before we move on to more lighter topics and whatnot. But what has that return to campus process looked like, at least from your view? Is everything? I know football is on a little bit of a 2-week pause right now, but outside of football, how is everything going with the return to campus?
One thing that's been great is that amidst this really challenging situation is that Dr. Larry Rink is one of the national leaders in sports medicine issues, related to this. I mean, he has been with the USOC, the IOC. He's now on the Big Ten task force as one of the major consultants to the commissioner on this. We had a 22-page return to play plan and protocol that has been widely copied by other Big Ten institutions. The Big Ten's been great. There's a daily call with athletic directors discussing some of these issues. There's been a lot of idea sharing on the best way to pull some of this off. It's going about as well as we can expect. I mean, one of the things that we've had to become accustomed to is that you're gonna have positive cases. It's how you deal with the positive cases that really matters. And when we paused football, it wasn't because there was this overwhelming outbreak of cases. It just touched enough people that it made sense to shut down, to regroup, to start back over at a later time. So it's going, pretty well. It's been phased in. It would have been really, really difficult to have all 700 athletes come back at the same time. So starting small and then building out from there has been the way that we've been operating. But the sports medicine staff, our athletic trainers, our chief medical officer, Dr. Andy Hipskin, they've been doing a really, really good job, trying to make it as safe and an effective environment as possible.
I have to imagine that's been just a whole nother ball game altogether. Meanwhile, the IU athletic department has had a massive changing of the guard here. Fred Glass retires, and you welcome Scott Dolson into the new athletic director role. And I mean, for anybody acquiring a new job or a new position of any kind, it's just so weird. I mean, you're meeting all of your people over Zoom. Little different for Mr. Dolson in the sense that he's been in the department for a while, but even then, he's the man now, and you guys haven't been able to have any, or at least very minimal, in-person communication with him.
Yeah, there have been some surreal elements to it. Fred Glass was the athletic director here for 12 years, which is very unusual in this line of work. To one, be able to walk out the front door and not be shoved out the front door, and to work that long as an athletic director. And, we're doing like online goodbyes to our boss, someone that we've worked for and cared about for a long period of time. It was weird where someone with that length of tenure and that amount of accomplishments, we would have had giant banquets and all sorts of in-person things going on under normal circumstances to send them off. So that was strange. And, the great thing about Scott, and it would have been really, really challenging had someone who was not already in the athletic department had to parachute into this. Not only not meeting people in person, but some substantial budget cuts made from the get-go. Literally the day, July 1st, all of a sudden we have a new budget situation, and to have someone not familiar with the athletic department would have been really, really tough. It's already tough enough. But Scott's done a great job in the transition, making sure that we're over communicated with. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so when people feel like they're in the dark, to not be communicated with adds to a level of anxiety and, professional challenge. But it's been a surreal transition, but it's been about as seamless as we could hope for under the circumstances.
Well, you got your toes wet this past semester. I know Hines was one of your students in B333.
Yeah.
What was that like to get to kind of move into the professor role and get to teach some of these guys some of the things that you had worked on for so many years?
It was great. I would actually say too that that was one of the things that I was most sad about. The students were getting better and better, and the real fun part of the semester was about to begin. And it was an in-person learning experience there. I did my best of pretend you're outside of a stadium and do a COVID report on your phone, but they needed to be on a teleprompter. They needed to be interviewing people in person. But the engagement of the students I thought was really good until the end. I got lucky where a lot of professionals, high-level professionals in the industry were willing to help and, take calls from our students and that was great. But really wanted to be able to say goodbye to the students in person and unable to do that. And we'll see how it goes this upcoming semester, but a good group. And I think a lot of future successful pros in the industry are going to come out of that class. No credit to me, but it was a great group of students and we were having a lot of fun.
I think one of them sitting up there in the Padres hat.
Yeah, no. And I'm not buttering him up for, favorable coverage in future years, but Connor is extraordinarily talented, very dedicated. And that's, there's a lot of people who are one, but not the other. And he's got both. And so I'll be proud to say I knew him at some point in time.
Okay. Let's get off the mic here. He's just buttering me up.
Well,
Jeremy,
go ahead.
You've been in charge of the Cuban Center since its inception in 2015. I mean, again, what we've been able to do, what we've been able to see the Cuban Center do, even since Austin and I have been here, has been remarkable, just in terms of the in-game elements that have been added to Assembly Hall. There's been so much in its just incredibly quick evolution, even since Austin and I have been there. What's your experience been with that? Whether it be being able to hire student interns, many of whom Austin and I have worked with, just to be able to grow the IU athletic department in that way. That's, at least in my view, one of the big calling cards of what IU athletics is now.
Well, you're awful nice to say so. That one of the great things is that it's grown at the same rate that the media school itself has grown. They've been working together, and the reputation of both has kind of grown at the same pace. And we're lucky that we've got a lot of students that are able to help us. One of the experiences with the Cuban Center is that all of this is new and experimental, and some things are awesome and some things don't work. So you got to kind of take the Wright brothers mentality, you know, the old footage of some of the planes take off and then crash immediately until you find the right one that goes off. So we experiment with new technologies, and this one's really cool. This one's not all that it's cracked up to be. So you take it in that direction. I would say now it's the most important. I mean, the launch from 15 to now was extraordinarily important, but now COVID has made the Cuban Center even more indispensable because they can't do on-campus visits. The coaches aren't allowed to go travel and go sit in a crowded gym or crowded travel soccer tournament in order to watch, prospective student athletes. The way we're recruiting now is digitally, and not only through, video, graphic design and all of that, but through Zoom and virtual campus tours. We're uniquely well positioned to do well. Our teams have recruited very well over the summer, including getting major commitments from athletes who've never even visited the campus. And not that the Cuban Center should take any credit for it, but it's going to be efforts from the Cuban Center as this becomes the new normal, and maybe the normal for a long time, on how you recruit. Being really effective in digital and social media and new ways of communicating would put Indiana a leg up on some other schools. And both through the students that we have and the staff that we have in the Cuban Center, we got a real chance to maybe separate from the pack a little bit.
I'm going to put it out there right now. And Heinz, I think you'll agree with me here. We're going to have Jeremy on again, because we haven't even touched on his broadcasting experience and all of that in his past. But I do want to talk about, I mean, you're in Bloomington. This is a city that really just kind of hugs the university. It feels like it works so well together. I mean, Heinz and I know why it's a great city, but kind of tell those at home, what makes Bloomington such a great college town?
Well, the way that I have described it, both in talking, sometimes I get to talk to recruits on their trip if they're interested in media or sport communication, or I'm part of the recruiting process when we're trying to hire a head coach, So what I say about Bloomington, and this is under normal circumstances, is that you can go to a Broadway show, a major sporting event, eat Thai food, have one of the best steaks you can eat in America, incredible public schools, great city parks, a great fitness community. You got nature within 10 minutes of your house, all of this within 15 minutes of your house. So it's a great place. It's a cosmopolitan small town in Indiana. I know people from where Connor is from come here, and it's a unique college experience. You're coming here, and not that it's a summer camp, but it has a summer camp feel to it, where it's just an eclectic college town, where you can do a lot of big city things, but it's still got a small town feel. And it's been a great place for me and my family, for sure.
Well, if we were in a non-COVID environment and everything was safe, where are your go-to places if I put you on the spot right now to go grab some food?
So my favorite restaurant in town is Uptown. Uptown has got the most consistent meal in town. Not to tell you too much, but they pour very consistent cocktails as well. It's a great spot. Love, going to Nick's, of course. Nick's is a great place. Fan of, Big Woods and Upland as well. And my wife likes C3 because it's quiet and kids aren't allowed. So we have a good time at C3 as well. But there's just any number of, great spots in town to go grab a bite to eat. When I do have the kids, you can't go wrong with a Buffalo Louie's. Just a variety of pizza options as well. So that was my non-answer for you.
Yeah, there we go. I have a friend I'm bringing him down and play the golf course in a couple weeks, and he's more excited for Buffalo's, I think, than he is the golf course. That's certainly a good spot.
Buffalo's has been a takeout staple over the last 5 months here in town. It's been great, and Ed and I play pickleball together. So if I didn't give his restaurant a mention, I was going to get a hard one in the chest the next time we play.
I love to hear that you're a fellow pickleballer. That's fantastic. That's a great and up and coming sport.
It is a great. It's like tennis without all that running.
Exactly. And, you can still get a workout, but it's a little bit easier.
Yeah, your knees don't feel terrible afterwards. And Ed Schwartzman, owner of Buffalo's, talks an insane amount of trash on the court. So he's fun. He's fun to play with.
Well, look at that. Well, Jeremy, thanks so much for giving us some of your time. I'm telling you, we're going to have to do part 2, diving into your broadcast experience, but we really appreciate you shedding some light on the athletic department and sharing some of your time with us.
Well, I'm home, so I'm available. So call if you want to have me on.
Thanks, Jeremy. Take care.
Take care,
Thanks,
guys.
Jeremy.
That was Jeremy Gray, of the Senior Associate Athletic Director for Strategic Communications and the Director of the Cuban Center. It's a mouthful, but he is a great guy. We both love Jeremy and love getting to chat with him. Let's bring in our next guest. He is Michael Sanserino. He is the Athletics Pittsburgh editor. He is a former Hoosier as well. Michael, can you hear us?
I can. Can you guys hear me?
Perfect. We got you. I love the Fort Wayne hat. That's right. Fantastic. He's a fellow 260er. I noticed that when I was texting you the other day. I love when I can find a fellow 260er. What have you been up to the past few months? I know the Athletics tried to be a little creative here with the fact that there were no live sports for so long. How do you see that creativity kind of come through the Athletics website?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been telling people I've been working harder without sports than I do with sports. Because, sports is like this machine, and we just try to keep the machine as clean as possible and, make sure there are no kinks or cogs or anything like that. Without sports, we had to be creative and think of different story ideas, different, series we could run. We had a Slack channel called Let's Get Weird, where we just try to throw crazy ideas at the wall and see what would stick. And then, it's just a lot of coordination. In the past, my calendar was the sports schedule, and now, for 5 months it was totally blank. So, we tried to get as weird as we could, and see what fun stories from the past that we could dive into, or things we could tell differently. So it was a good exercise in creativity, but I'm glad we're playing games again.
Well, jumping into your career a little bit, Brody was kind of filling me in on some stuff over email. He told me you were the sports editor of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette at 29 years old. What's your advice for people trying to break into an industry that's so competitive, especially right now? Obviously, none of us know how to break into an industry during a pandemic, but what is your advice to someone trying to get into such a competitive industry?
My advice, and this is, it's not easy advice. It's find a good mentor, right? And I told this to Brody too. Like when he left and he was looking for jobs, it's not as important where you go as it is who you'll be reporting to. Do you know who your editor is going to be, or do you know who your producer is going to be, or whatever it might be. Make sure you find somebody who you can trust, who will give you good advice and good counsel, who will help you grow as a journalist, whatever your job is. I think it's really important who your boss is, and that you have respect for them and trust in them, and that they can trust you, because I think ultimately that's what's going to help you get, that next step. Is if somebody is going to take time and develop you and, help your talents grow, you'll be able to grow into whatever that next job is, or, be as aspirational as you want to be. If you don't have that type of nurturing, it doesn't matter where you are, you're going to fail.
I know the content site that Austin and I manage, the Hoosier Network, we just got our own editor for all of our written stuff last year. And I think both of us know how important that is now. And he's just been an immense help to us, to our writers, whoever it may be. how important in your experience is having a good editor, whether it be for the writer or for the editor himself, his or herself, just to improve, their own work as well at the same time?
So, it's critically important. I say this as an editor. A little bit of preservation there.
Sure.
But I was a writer for my first 6-7 years, and I knew what it was like to have a bad editor. I knew what it was like to stagnate and to not grow, and to struggle, right? And we all have a certain amount of ego in this industry. I went out of college and I was pretty proud of, my talent and, the resume I had through internships and things like that. And I found myself in my first few years as a journalist not growing because I didn't have somebody who was pushing me or challenging me. It's just, watching The Last Dance, right? During quarantine, and the Bulls didn't click until they got Phil Jackson, right? I mean, Jordan was great. He was scoring tons of points, but they didn't win until they got Phil Jackson. I think the same thing is true in journalism or whatever it might be. You might have all the talent in the world and you might have a great work ethic, but if you don't have somebody who can step in as somewhat like an independent arbiter or somewhat like this unbiased, neutral source, you're not going to be molded into whatever you need to be to succeed to the best of your ability. So I feel the same way about editing and journalism. And I think just the sharper an editor is and the more they question you and push you, the better you're going to be in ways you don't even realize until later.
Brody, these are Brody's words. When you were at IU covering the Sampson era and all that stuff, he called you a, quote, absolute badass for the IDS. What was it like? What do you remember about the IDS? We'll talk about the Kelvin Sampson stuff in a minute, but how did the IDS kind of prepare you for the world ahead and where you are now? And what do you remember about your time there with the Indiana Daily Student?
Yeah, my fondest memories from my time at IU are all related to the IDS. Whether that's in the newsroom or out of the newsroom, the friends I'm still in touch with today, we all worked at the IDS together. It was, this stressful environment where we were like the scrappy underdogs trying to, find that big scoop or one up the Herald Times at the time, trying to prove ourselves to one another and prove ourselves to our professors. We always call it like a learning lab, and it was a fun competitive environment where we got to let loose and make some good friends. And we had this tradition at the time back when Yogis was still there, although it's back, right? It's in a different spot.
It is back. Yeah. Yogis has returned.
Yeah. So we always, whenever we put the last paper to bed on a Thursday night, we go to Yogis because they had half price microbrews and their Buffalo chips were on sale. So like just every Thursday night after a stressful week of staying up late and, writing and editing, we just go and, have some, dragonfly and eat these terribly oil saturated Buffalo chips and try to let loose a little bit.
What real quick sidebar there. What was Yogis like, the original Yogis? Because I know I've been to the new one once, and a lot of people rave about the new one, but I live right down the street from where old Yogis was, and I mean, from everything I hear from everyone your age or older, it was just like it competed with Kilroy's back then.
Yeah, like Yogis was, it was a place unto itself, right? It never felt like a college bar, because Yogis to me always felt like the bar outside of Nick's, where when alumni would come back with their family, they could go to Yogis, right? And sit and have a meal, and it'd be like a decent meal. And then there was a sports bar element to it. So there's the seated dining area, and then there was the sports bar element to it. But even that never got too rowdy. So it always felt like I don't want to call it classy because it wasn't classy, but it was just like a little classier than the Kirkwood bars or anything like that.
I agree with Heinz. I think especially our editor, Alex McCarthy, give him a shout out. I think that guy's the biggest Yogis fan that
Huge.
I have ever met. I do want to touch on the Kelvin Sampson stuff. I mean, that is some bizarre Indiana moments that I'm sure you won't forget. What was it like being a part of that? And what do you remember when the news started kind of trickling into the system about, whoa, this guy is doing some stuff that might make him lose his job?
Yeah, it was a surreal year. It really was. I mean, the first thing I remember is there was like an internet message board rumor that dropped like the day after Hoosier Hysteria. And I was in my apartment and I read it on, I think it was on Peaks or whatever. And it's just like, hey, just an FYI, this is happening, illegal phone calls, just like he had at Oklahoma. And, the temperature of everybody at the time was like, all right, this is totally bogus. Like, and it didn't happen until like Monday or Tuesday of that week. And then, IU released its self-report on what happened. And from that point on, it was just like from October until February, you're waiting for the NCAA to sort of drop the hammer. And so, the team was pretty successful. They had Eric Gordon, they had DJ White, they were a top 10, top 5 team. And what happened, like they went to Ohio State, won on the road there, and like really cementing themselves as a top 5 team in college basketball. And then that week was when the NCAA released its notice of infractions, and it just like the bottom dropped out of that team. It was crazy. I mean, so for like a week and a half, you had Kelvin Sampson's job status was hanging in the balance. You had big games against, I want to say Purdue, definitely against Michigan State. I remember them playing Michigan State, winning at home, and the student section chanting Kelvin Sampson, when it was pretty apparent to everybody this guy was going to be fired within a week. And that
sounds on brand for the IU section.
Probably the thing I remember the most about it was the IU media relations folks saying like, hey, we're not answering any questions about this, so don't ask. And I never followed that because it's not my job to determine what you can't tell me what I can ask. I'm going to put you on the spot. And it's not a cop. You can't have like an SID say, hey, he's not going to answer this question, so he's not going to face any tough questions. It's like, no, I'm going to make you squirm a little bit. So I always did it because I was, I wanted to be like this hard ass reporter and try to prove myself. And, hopefully today I'd still do that because I think we should do that. But Kelvin Sampson always called me Hoss when I asked these questions. And he's like, I'll tell you what, Hoss, we said we're not going to answer these questions. So it was,
I think this is where Brody's absolute badass comes from here. I think we're finding it out as you tell this story.
Well, so the one thing I remember the most from that time was it was decision day for IU and Kelvin Sampson because they needed to move ahead. So we camped out at Assembly Hall right outside of Rick Greenspan's office. Rick Greenspan was the athletic director at the time. And, we believed that there was going to be some type of news. I think there were rumors of a press conference happening that following day. So it was, a few IDS reporters, a few Herald Times reporters, and we were just sitting waiting for Rick Greenspan to come out of his office. And, 6 o'clock turns to 7, turns to 8, turns to 9. At one point, Greenspan's son shows up with a bag of McDonald's and a pillow and walks past us into his dad's office, like clearly indicating like, oh, he's pulling an all-nighter. He's going to sleep here. And we were undeterred, man. We stuck around, and it was just before midnight. We had the associate athletic director leave out of one door and a couple of us follow. And then Greenspan snuck out the back door and ran down the hallway of Assembly Hall. And so I'm running after him. Like I finally catch up to him at the door and I get his attention. I'm like, Mr. Greenspan. He stops and he turns around. And I realized at that point, like I did not have a specific question in mind. that I needed to ask him. I should have asked, is Kelvin Sampson still the basketball coach? Something like that. And instead I was just like, do you have any comment? And he did not. So it was a good lesson in like always maybe being a little more prepared than you think you are.
It seems like, you have your stories about the Kelvin Sampson days. There have been so many, I guess, enigmatic figures in IU basketball and IU athletics, whether it be Sampson, Crean, of course, the one and only Bobby Knight. I think Austin would agree with me when I say that the coaching staffs and, even the athletes that we cover right now are just very, not to say that they're boring or not exciting, but it's just very steady, level-headed. When you have this super rich history, with all these just characters in Indiana athletics, it doesn't seem quite that way right now. What have your experiences been in, sort of like covering different personalities and your different approaches to someone like Kelvin Sampson versus someone like Archie Miller, who's, very level, straight, not as, characterized in that same way?
Yeah. As a reporter, as a journalist, you root for the people who make headlines and are characters and are enigmatic. Apathy is one of the worst things you can have. And I think that's true. Like if you're running a team, you never want your fan base to be apathetic. And I'm not saying IU fans are apathetic about Archie or anything like that. It's just, Archie is not, he's not the character that Crean was. He's not the, troublemakers that, Knight and Sampson were. So, yeah, it's ultimately like people are going to write about you if you win. And I think, if Archie's able to turn this team into, a Big Ten title contender or, one of the top teams in the country, you're going to see people start to talk a bit more about him and, peel some of those layers back. But, outside of Sean's infractions or relative infractions in Arizona, it's a pretty straight-laced family, from the Pittsburgh area. So
yeah,
it's
Sean's clean. I don't know what you're talking about. Sean is crystal clean.
Yeah, we'll wait and see what the FBI tapes say there, but
well, in like 5 or 6 years, maybe.
Right. Yeah.
He'll be retired by then.
He'll have a nice nest egg saved up, I'm sure too.
Yeah. So what you're saying is Dan Dakich was the perfect coach and they missed the opportunity. Is that what you're saying here?
It's been really interesting to watch Dan Dakich emerge as this, media personality in Indianapolis, because I loved the 2 months I covered, I guess less than that, the 1 month I covered of him as IU's basketball coach, because he gave some like really eloquent answers, was thoughtful. And I remember after they lost in the NCAA tournament in the first round to Arkansas, and someone asked him like if he should be the coach at Indiana going forward, and he gave this like 5-minute monologue about what Indiana basketball needed. And he was saying it was him. And, I think most people who were watching kind of realized it wasn't going to be him, but it was really interesting to hear him talk. Like he was like thoughtful and smart and articulate, and, and now he's turned into this like heel, like this wrestling caricature. And I know there's a different Dan Dakich in there. So yeah, I don't think they definitely didn't miss like getting Dakich, but there was a point in time where I really looked up to Dakich and what he said and the way he was leading. So
I'm blocked on Twitter by him, I think, since middle school. So I think I tweeted some things where I didn't like him, and in middle school he blocked me. So I have nothing to lose here. Not like he's gonna come after me. He already blocked me, but
he's a definite name searcher, so you don't even have to add him.
I never added him, I don't think. But that was quick. My last thing here, you've been tweeting some pictures of the comment sections on some of your athletic stories and whatnot. How do you handle when you get some wild comments or some just harsh comments? How do you deal with that as the editor, or even back when you were the writer of the stories?
Yeah, we're lucky at The Athletic. I think, our commenters are pretty good. since it's a subscription site, we get fewer wild ones where people can just log in and flame people. That's tough. I mean, it's tough to deal with criticism, and you have to develop thick skin, and that's easier said than done, because the only way you do it is to expose yourself to it, right? I mean, there were times when I'd file a story, especially like on deadline when I was covering baseball, and I just knew that something got through because I spent 15 minutes writing this thing, and it reveals some insecurities in you and things like that. And I think it just comes with the territory. And over time it gets easier to deal with, and hopefully you learn from it. And it just like working with an editor who's going to critique you and things like that, hopefully it can sharpen you as a reporter and make you a bit more aware of your deficiencies or areas where you have weak spots, and try to improve and go from there.
I got to make sure I have the right Twitter account, but it said that you were a dad joke teller in your bio. I'm going to put you on the spot. If that is truly the real Michael Sanserino, put you on the spot. Give us your best dad joke that you can come up with right now.
Oh, man. All right. So the best dad jokes happen in the moment.
Yeah, that's fair. That's totally. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I've never been more proud. We have twins, and they turn 5 next month. I've never been more proud than when my twin daughter said, "Hey, Dad, I'm hungry," and then my son, her twin, said, "Hi, hungry. I'm Matthew." And I was like, I've done it. Like I can retire as a dad. Like I've won fatherhood.
That was something my mom did in our family. That's fantastic. I love that.
That's great.
Is that a Dragons hat? Before I let you go, is that a Fort Wayne Dragons?
This is the original
Wizards.
Fort Wayne Wizards. Yeah, this was their original logo before they had like a newfangled Wizards logo before they switched to the tin caps. But like this was OG 1993. 6-year-old Michael Sanserino getting his first taste of minor league baseball.
I love it.
Love it.
I will say things have improved a little bit for the tin caps, but I remember those Wizards days. That concrete block of a stadium over there by the Coliseum. I went to a few of those as a little kid.
It was it belonged in its time, and it's better now. But it's like I just read a tribute to Three River Stadium in Pittsburgh, and PNC Park by all accounts is so much better than Three River Stadium. But there's just something about those like concrete blocks of stadiums that, as uncharming as they are, there's just a little bit of charm there that you kind of like and miss.
Yeah.
There's a charm, there's nostalgia about those old stadiums.
Yeah, I mean that that like Parkview Field in downtown Fort Wayne, beautiful, one of the top parks in the minor leagues. But the old Memorial Stadium or whatever it was, that was part of my childhood. So yeah, I mean, I don't miss it, but I miss it.
Yeah. Well, Michael, thanks so much for giving us some of your time today. We appreciate picking your brain a little bit. Stay safe, enjoy the time with your family, and hopefully the MLB pushes through and we continue to have some sports here coming up.
We'll see. You guys stay safe, and thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael. Take care.
Appreciate it.
That was Michael Sanserino, the Athletics Pittsburgh editor. He's been through a lot. We didn't even touch on his time as an intern at the Wall Street Journal, but IDS, Wall Street Journal, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and he's still young. I mean, he's making his rounds there. Thanks to Brody Miller for giving us some of these great contacts that I've reached out to the past couple of days. Michael, first one to get back with us. But good episode, Connor. I'm telling you, we got to have Jeremy on again. That guy is he's a storyteller. He's a fantastic guy. And Michael was great too, shedding some light on what you and I will never take for granted, and that's having a good editor.
This
really important.
This might have been my favorite one that I've done with you yet. I mean, we talked a little bit, coronavirus pandemic with Jeremy. Obviously, he's a well-known name around these parts in terms of leading IU athletics, and it's been a very interesting, strange time, to say that would be a massive understatement. And then with Michael, I didn't even feel the need to talk about
No, we had
pandemic
so
with him
much to
just because
talk about.
he had so much other good stuff. IU Media School made another great successful media school grad. So just to be able to chat with all these great people, whether they be affiliated with Indiana or not, it's been awesome. To circle back, Austin, to what we began the show with, I mean, only time will tell with this MLB situation. I think we're going to have an answer for the better or worse by the end of the day. But I mean,
I think it would look bad if they don't have an answer.
For those watching on YouTube, staying positive, keeping the positive energy going. San Diego
For those
Padres,
on the podcast, he's pointing at his Padres hat.
They are your first place holders in the current National League West. So
are they undefeated?
They lost yesterday.
They lost, so they're 2-1.
The plan is to wrap up against the Diamondbacks this afternoon. We'll see if that happens, though. I think I
got to become a Padres fan.
Yes,
because
please
I'm a devoted Tin Caps fan.
Our good friend Kurt Spittler, he has hopped on the wagon. I got a text from Hoosier Network alum Teddy Bailey saying that he loves the San Diego Padres. Get on the train or get out of the way.
Late night baseball. The issue is I don't know if I get the channels to watch the Padres all the time.
This is true. Neither do I, but there are various ways of going about that.
I think I know some ways to fix that. I get the marquee channel so I can watch the Cubs, but
hey, we talk so much in the fall about Pac-12 after dark. How about NL West?
Padres after dark.
After dark. That is what we're talking about. Hopefully, we continue to get it here in the coming days and weeks.
The MLB kind of stole all other headlines today when we woke up and saw those things. I mean, there's some other stuff, and we could talk about it on Wednesday when we have Tamar back on. But training camp is set to start, I believe, this week
tomorrow.
For the NFL tomorrow. So we'll see how that goes. The NBA is set to start this weekend, which is going to be nuts. It's just going to be a sprint to the finish. There's going to be people who are not going to care about those first 8 games. I'm curious to see how some of the teams who have big leads just kind of relax in those first 8 games, kind of treat them as more scrimmages, or are you just happy to be out there and you just go for it? But there's so much intrigue there. There's so much going on, and I think we're cross our fingers. We are heading into a very exciting month of August. It is as Steve Aird asked us last week, it is a multi-TV setup. Get your living rooms ready for lots of sports type.
Yes. Who would have thought at this time 2 months ago, 3 months ago, that we would actually have an hour's worth of content to put out on a podcast 3 days a week? I mean, there's so much to talk about regardless of this pandemic and everything going on.
I wrote a whole reflection on that for for my internship this summer. I had to write a reflection paper, and I said, look, back in May when I was presented this idea, I was like, look, what are we going to talk about for an hour 3 days a week? I mean, we don't have 3 hours worth of sports content to talk about. But that just a huge shout out to this is episode 30, to the nearly 60 people that have come on our show. And I get it. Some of them may have absolutely nothing better to do because they're sitting at home, but we really appreciate a lot of these fantastic names in the business giving us 20 minutes of their time. A huge episode last Friday. If you didn't catch up with us, the past 2 Fridays have been fantastic. We had Steve Aird on 2 weeks ago, and last Friday we had the Todd father, Todd Yeagley, and Erwin Van Bennekom. They both came on back to back, women's and men's soccer, talking a little bit about the pandemic, but also about just soccer in general. Really enlightening conversations with both of them. So would highly recommend going and checking out episode 29. You can check out any of our 30 episodes wherever you get your podcasts or visually on the IU Sports Media YouTube page. I think that'll wrap things up here for our Monday episode. For Michael Sanserino and Jeremy Gray and Connor Hines to my left, I am Austin Renders saying so long from today's episode of Unpaid Interns.